My guest today is Jules Brenner. Jules is the CEO of Industrial Succession Group, where they invest and acquire sub 5 million EBITDA industrial businesses that are not interested in selling their business to a competitor or private equity investor. Thanks a lot for coming to the HoldCo Builder show, Jules.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
By the way, you're an perfect person to talk to, as there are so many people interested in what you're doing. And what I mean is you acquiring a very traditional so-called boring businesses. So please tell me what type of companies you have in your portfolio and maybe a ballpark of the top line revenue, profit, number of employees, if you can share.
Yeah, sure. So we started with a thesis to do exactly what you mentioned, right? Find like industrial school companies that just need a little bit more like sales, marketing, professionalism to go to the next stage. And we really wanted to focus in on like a thesis driven strategy. So we started with the metal fabrication space, and we own 3 companies in the space, so which I can get into details later. But total amount of the companies, we're running about 100 employees. We're working on a few other purchases for this year, for 2024, which should put us over the 150 to closer to 200 mark by the end of the year. So depending on where we'll land with that, we'll have a different revenue EBITDA expectation. But we'd like to ultimately by 2028 get to at least 100 million in revenue with these metal fabrication businesses.
Okay, and these are platform type companies or they're just independent companies?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them a platform. So in the sub 5 million EBITDA, it's a lot of what you call like micro market. And a lot of the businesses, they don't have like the management staff to really be considered like a proper platform. So you kind of have to make that. So you come in as the ownership group and you fill in those gaps and do like 10 different job roles until you get to scale and can bring those sort of people in. So probably about after about like the third purchase we made, that's when it started to really feel like this could be an individual platform if we bought it this way.
But do you consider acquiring those much smaller players? What I mean is maybe there is a specific company that manufactures like a very tiny piece which you need. At the moment you need to acquire this small pieces, but now you could acquire the whole company, or how does it work?
It starts off with companies that are pretty small on their own. Each of them would be they definitely be like you're buying yourself a job if you were to buy any of these companies on your own. But if you bring them collectively under one roof, you create enough synergies from a cash perspective to justify like let's say a dedicated HR person or a dedicated purchasing person, and really make it look more like what a traditional like platform might look like in the world of business buying.
When you looking at those businesses, the ones you acquired, what are the margins we are talking about with these type of businesses in these industries?
In the industry, gross margins we've seen anywhere from like a 35% to like a 55%. It varies. So you can imagine 35 is probably somebody who's doing more contract work, where they sign contracts for many years and they know exactly what they're doing every single day. So a trade-off for that stability is you're going to have a lower profit margin, just because the buyer on the customer side is going to have probably more purchasing power. They know how valuable it is to have consistent guaranteed revenue. And then like the reverse of that on the 55% spectrum is going to be like your low volume, high mix type products, stuff with like quick lead times. So, you want ultimately a really balanced portfolio of these businesses to have a good blended result.
Reading about your journey, you pretty much found this opportunity for industrial businesses by talking to the business owners and finding out that their kids are not interested in taking over their father's industrial company. Then you decided to work for those companies for 3 years, and then you made the decision you would be interested in acquiring one yourself. Could you give a brief overview of how it all happened?
I think the biggest summary of how it all happened was basically one step in front of the other. Our team definitely got punched in the face a lot going on through this journey. But so I was a mechanical engineer, mechanical aerospace, originally from New York. In New York, there are like a good amount of industrial companies, but nothing like in California. California, depending on when you look at it, is like the #1 manufacturing state in the US. And it's also very dense, with northern like Bay Area and southern like LA area being very big pockets of those sorts of companies. So When I moved to California, I knew I wanted to do something in the industrial sector. I was just literally looking for jobs, and I was talking to a lot of different business owners, whether they were running a more modern startup type industrial company all the way to the most old school like manufacturing type operation. And when I was doing that, I saw that these manufacturing guys, as it relates to California, they had this consistent pattern of, the kids don't want it. Some of their kids are out of state, whatever it is. These guys didn't really have a lot of good plans for what was next in the company. So kind of saw a need in that market, and then we just decided to fill it.
You started the search in March 2020. It was the month when the COVID craziness started, and it took you 2.5 years of research to acquiring a manufacturing business. What industries were you looking for when you started, and how was the whole journey? Because 2.5 years, it's a long time. A lot of people would probably give up.
Yeah, it definitely a long time. It was interesting because we started March 2020, and that's when we knew COVID was in the world, but we also it was tough to tell how long it would last. Part of me was like, it might last till August of that year, and then whatever, it'll take 5 months of slowness and then revamp up. Boy, were we wrong about that. So, we knew we wanted to buy a manufacturing company. And I actually just started with just calling those sellers that I met for when I was in my job hunt. And I told them I was looking to buy a business. And a lot of them were, telling me I'd love to talk about a sale, but I don't even know if I'm going to be in business tomorrow. And worse than being in metal fab, they were in aerospace. So a lot of them had heavy commercial exposure, and with all the planes being grounded, they just all of their pipelines started to slow down and get pushed out. So quickly found that something to do with aerospace was not going to work, given the kind of point in history when all this started. So started to look at different facets of the manufacturing community, especially metal fabrication businesses. We took a really hard run at a lighting company out in the Midwest. That one actually got pretty close to closing. We spent probably 6 months with it before the deal ultimately died. Sellers just changed their mind. Kind of sucked, but lighting was one of those few industries that actually was still moving pretty well during COVID. And then eventually, when that didn't work out, we came across the company we ended up buying, which does metal for the infrastructure community in California. So roads, bridges, highways, etc. And that definitely boomed during COVID, with all the roads being cleared up with no drivers. A lot of those endeavors accelerated. So that's ultimately how we found ourselves here. But we will probably find ourselves in aerospace again. We just got to wait for that industry to kind of recycle from COVID.
I was reading a bit about those so-called failed acquisitions, that you had 6 to 7 of those before you actually closed the one you have at the moment. And you mentioned lighting industry. I was reading about the business, 3 million EBITDA, and it actually died 30 to 40 days before the close. So in here, what we're talking about, it's pretty easy. It's all history. Who cares? But I think when it actually happened, I'm sure you were very emotionally involved. So maybe you can share a bit how you actually felt once you got the news that it won't happen. Were you in the car driving somewhere feeling a bit down, or how was it?
Yeah, it was interesting. So when it officially died, I wouldn't say it was a total surprise. I was talking to the sellers for some time, and then we went under LOI. A lot of stuff moved pretty smoothly. I met up with them a few times, and then I just started getting this feeling based on their responses that the two partners who own that company, who are 50-50, one of them was just changing his mind out of nowhere. I don't know whether it was they were expecting certain tax regulations to change during that time, and then they didn't. And maybe that motivated the sale, but then that changed. So then they didn't want to sell. But I had that feeling that it was something was getting uneasy with it. So after going out one more time to try to talk to them in person, I had a pretty good feeling something was going to change with this thing pretty quickly. I don't know whether we're going to ask for more money or whatever it was. But yeah, when something like that dies, it really, really sucks, especially if you've also spent the time to go get financing for the deal. So not only are you basically having to, kind of let yourself down, if you will, but you're having to do the same with the lenders and equity folks that you brought into it. So yeah, it's definitely a pretty crappy feeling, especially if it's a really nice deal, which that one was. But you live and you learn, and hopefully you took some of those relationships and moved it on to the next deal you did.
You said something which I find very interesting, again, about this failed deal in the Lightning business. The investors you talked to really enjoyed the way you did the following. Number one, the way you were thinking about the business, the way you were structuring it, and the way you were presenting it. What did you do to get such a great feedback? And maybe you can share a bit about each of those.
One of the things that we got compliments on was the way we presented our marketing materials, our SIM, the kind of the presentation to the investors on that deal. Aside from, I would say, it being very kind of clear to the point, which is something I learned back when I was in the venture capital world. It also had very details on some of the stuff that I've picked up on them wanting to know. So kind of what I did was every time I showed the opportunity to an investor, I would write down all the questions that they asked and made sure so that the next time the next investor saw our deck, they wouldn't have those questions. The deck would have already addressed them, and we would get to the call, and hopefully they'd say, well, I don't have anything else to ask you. I'm either in or I'm not, kind of thing, right? So that was my goal. Eliminate all the questions before they became questions. So I think that's probably what we did really, really well. And then I think the other thing is some of the folks were very surprised that we were still at it. By the time that lighting deal came, I mean, you mentioned, right, that we had 6 deals that we aggressively chased, with the lighting being the biggest one before the one that we ultimately closed. A lot of them were surprised that we're even still at it, right? I mean, the average search is 1.5 years. So, the fact that we were still at it, I think was, I don't know, gave people some confidence that we were going to be kind of continuing at this regardless of the results. I think those 2 things for sure.
So a bit more about a general idea or opportunity you pursue. You mentioned oftentimes with those businesses you acquire, they're very hard, messy businesses. Oftentimes you're buying yourself a job. It's very different from what you did previously. So my question to you, what do you know now that you did not know before this journey of trying to acquire a business in this industry? Some of the lessons from this journey.
It's interesting, right? So I think one of the things we're very grateful for is that we chose an industry where there's a very strong opportunity for M&A due to a fragmented market with a lot of mom and pop facilities that need good succession options. You can solve a ton of problems through M&A, right? So let's say you bought your first deal and they have a high customer concentration, or let's say even they don't, you have some customers leave. Very hard to fix that quickly, especially if you're buying a deal with debt and there's a debt clock. But very easy to fix quickly if you buy a competitor, merge the two, and blend out the total ratio. And the competitor, maybe they suck at operating, they're bad margins, whatnot, but they're really good at bringing revenue in the door. So if you mesh the 2 worlds together, you can create a larger company that's a lot more diversified. I think we're very grateful that we have those options with what we do. We run into a period where we have a ton of work that we've won or something. We can go buy a facility pretty quickly that has, not enough work going through it, and add those capacity very fast, rather than having to stand up a plant and get the working capital and stuff like that to operate it, the people, etc. So I think that's been a big learning lesson. And I think also, when you buy your first deal, you in any industry in general, I think even probably if we tried to buy something in a new vertical tomorrow, we'd have the same mindset, which is you don't know every detail. So it feels like you're taking a pretty big risk. And sometimes even that platform deal, it's very likely you're going to overpay for it. It feels even more riskier. So for that reason, we really try to think about how can we make sure that when we get into it, we have a plan for most things that can go wrong, with the thought that our plan probably will change a little bit, but it's not like we're making a live decision, right? If this large customer leaves me, I want to know I'm going to do one of 3 things or something like that. And, this employee leaves us, whatever, 1 of 3 things. So I don't know, maybe that's the engineer in me kind of hedging all the risks like that, but that's definitely something that's been pretty impactful to us.
While on this journey of acquiring this first business, you met some very smart and experienced folks. And you said in your previous interviews that you've been changing your mind about which type of businesses you'd like to acquire, and that's probably the nature of learning about the industry and M&A. And one of the things you brought out was the perfect versus imperfect businesses. Like every business is hard. What did you change your mind over the years when it comes to those two types of businesses and bad businesses, good businesses, and how do you think about this now?
When you start out, it's very tough to get a good sense for, is it a good company, but is it just small? Or is it just like, maybe totally of just it's bad and small, something like that, right? So, the worst thing you can do is like a broker messes with the financials and makes it look like a little bit of a bigger company, but it's actually not that, not that good revenue quality to start with. And that's where you can run into trouble. That's where you overpay for a bad thing. We've definitely gathered more appreciation for the small business. We don't need to buy something every time like closer to 5 million of EBITDA or closer to 10 million of revenue, right? We can stick much smaller as long as we feel it's like a good company that has good bones to it. We've thought about some plans to hedge the risk. So when we started doing that, we started looking at a lot more different kinds of deals. Sometimes even when you buy something, maybe doing like even as little as 2 million of revenue, which is the smallest we'll go in metal fab, they may be in the door with one customer that you already want to work with. And it might be a small portion of sales, but they're in the door already. So that's worth something. Like you maybe can't quantify that directly with EBITDA. That's worth something to you, right? So, I think that's been a lot of the mental shift, if you will, in what we're trying to do. But on kind of the opposite of that, we've stopped trying to chase big deals. I think, there's brokers that'll offer bigger deals that are, maybe our size now, and they want like pretty substantial multiples for it. And some of them do get it in the market, right? But there was a time where I would say we were like more excited about a bigger deal, but now we very clearly realized that, the financial returns and the growth, oftentimes they're not in deals like that. Those are situations where you lower your IRR to maybe somewhere in the teens, 20s, something like that. And then you just run them pretty consistently instead of trying to do aggressive growth pushes like what we're doing now.
What about your mental shift about the quality of the revenue of those businesses? I mean, there are some businesses which have the recurring revenue, and many of them, I guess, is project-based revenue. What are your thoughts about this?
I think recurring revenue, I mean, you hear it so much now. It's tougher and tougher to find in the market now. There's definitely like, you can get your landscaping business, you can get your, I don't know, accounting firm or something like that, right? And they're going to have contractual revenue. The challenge is everyone is trying to buy a deal like that now, right? So, you're going to ride up multiples. It's going to probably get to a point that you bought a good company at a more expensive price, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that means you have less money to reinvest in growth. If you bought a consistent recurring revenue business, but you paid 6-7 times for it, you're probably just going to spend more money paying your loans every month, and you're going to get your IRR. It'll probably be not bad, but that cash needs to go back into growth. So what instead we've tried to do is say, all right, how do we buy businesses that have more like either around the spectrum of project-based or like recurring revenue? So the same customers ordering every day or every few weeks or whatever. And there's predictability to their ordering patterns over a few years. And we try to understand in those situations, like what value we add to that customer versus maybe some of the other options, like why, they choose to deal with us. We instead work on keeping backlog. So if I backlog the business, for 6 months fully, I mean, that's not, call it recurring revenue, but if I always keep 6 months in front of me, it's a pretty stable situation, right? As long as customers aren't pulling orders and stuff like that. And if it's parts you've made before, you get a pretty good handle on margins. And the difference would be you're not bleeding as much cash out every month to pay a loan because you can probably pay a good price for that deal.
When you're looking at the deals, you consider different valuations. And what you've said is if you paid nothing for the company, would you still buy it? Like, yeah. Looking at deals, how often do you actually ask this question from yourself?
It's become pretty often now. It's kind of interesting. So that's maybe the other thing that we've also started to see. So kind of maybe a backstory here. So we are focusing on Southern California metal fab right now for this current thesis. Metal fabricators in Southern California, there's a lot of them out here. It's like 2,500 in SoCal and 4,500 in the rest of California. The difference for these metal fabricators in California maybe versus ones in the Midwest is, they're located in one of the most expensive industrial building markets in the country. So we have the port of Long Beach here, which is one of the busiest ports from stuff from China. So a lot of our sellers are very real estate rich on their buildings, usually 8 figures and up for a small building. For that reason, when they go to sell, if the business isn't fully optimized, they've been pulling cash out and there's not a lot of EBITDA, but a good amount of revenue, they, can't go get like a traditional multiple on EBITDA for the business, but because they own the building, they don't necessarily need money. So in those situations, we've started making more offers that are more like liquidation value of the balance sheet and the machines. So, that's, you're never going to get like, call it zero, but that's pretty close to that situation. And then, of course, there's always still risk. You can, have bad months and lose and stuff like that. But we're finding more of those often now than before, for sure.
Team of experts, you're not doing it alone. How was the process of finding those right people and creating such a great team you have today?
Yeah, a team is tough. So, it's a lot of like, over time, we try to just have people know who we are. And then when the right people apply, I think they tend to be, attracted to certain things that this vehicle offers than maybe something else. We started with myself, March of 2020. Our CFO joined April, so the next month after that. We then found our director of finance a year later, and then it kind of kept going from there. And then someone new every like 3 to 6 months, something like that. I think we try very hard to let the world know about like what our culture is in these businesses. Our LinkedIn's are, there's employee spotlight videos and things like that. And then eventually just people got there. And then one thing that I think we are very insistent on is we have like basically a minimum for, if you work for our management company, you have to be at least like an A player in what you do. And that's kept a pretty high standard, not only for the people that come in, but the people that do stay here. I think they appreciate that. It's very hard to find environments that are, that kind of are have our foot down about things like that. So that's been it. And then, making sure that they're consistently challenged, I think is where, we put a lot of brain power, right? We want to make sure that they, stay engaged and interested and put deals and hard integration situations in front of them to do that.
Not many people are interested in those messy manufacturing companies and prefer those hyper growth startups. Did you have prior relationships with them, or how did you approach them in the first place?
Part of what I did in my career was industrial technology. So I was part of like VC and PE back, how like high growth plays, trying to take tech into like the really old school sectors of the economy, industrial economy, and modernize it, give them competitive advantage. Like I knew that, if I just like owned those businesses myself, I would implement those technologies much faster rather than what I saw myself being on like the sales side of those technologies. So like I knew of some for sure. Some of those sellers I knew from my like job searching days, but for the most part, there's a lot of outreach, a lot of list formulation, a lot of outreach, brokers, that was a big one too. But like the cool thing about Southern California is that a lot of guys know each other. So when you buy one company, typically like the other targets you're going to talk to know of that seller. And there's a bit of an exponential effect that can happen right there.
When it comes to structuring the deal, I'm sure you've discussed it with folks who have done 10, if not hundreds of acquisitions. What do you think when structuring such deals, and what is your thought process behind it?
Yeah, it's always really tough. It's always different, right? I mean, sometimes you'll have situations where like businesses have list prices. Sometimes you as the buyer have to take the burden on kind of guessing and structuring from there. There's a few parameters we look for, right? So like liquidation value of balance sheet is always like the lowest the business will sell for. And the most we'll pay is like 4.5 times cash flow. From there, we try to understand like, is this business that we're buying more of like a healthy cash flowing company or more of like the liquidation value side of the spectrum? And if it's, let's say it's the more healthy traditional cash flowing company, we pretty much try to offer something like 3 times the cash flow upfront. Where we tend to get snagged up is brokers have a different idea of what cash flow is. If we're buying the same kind of metal fab target, we likely have seen a bunch of metal fab targets already. We have SIMs, we have sets of financials. So when a broker who's like selling his, second metal shop that year is trying to argue with us on what it'll take to run that company, we're likely a much better understanding than they do. right? We know like every metric of what your revenue should be as a percentage of uniform expenses and, square footage per employee and every little detail. So that certainly helps us in like rebuilding their actual cash flow. And then we do our 3 times multiple on that up front. And then we try to have a seller note component. Usually we have the seller note be like the risk for any customer concentration. We absorb 10 to 15% of that risk ourselves. Anything over that, we like to have it be part of a seller note.
What about when looking for different businesses to acquire? What are the obvious red flags? Something you see and you're like, okay, no point of wasting time here. Let's move on. There are plenty of good deals.
Well, typically it's honestly valuation oriented. In SoCal, there's one brokerage that unfortunately they keep getting a lot of metal fabricator deals, and they keep convincing those sellers that their EBITDA margins are like they're some software company. So they just add back a bunch of stuff, and what should be like a 20-25% EBITDA margin at max, they'll pitch buyers that it's a 35 to 45 or something insane, which is a very fast way to have a gigantic issue in these kinds of companies. So typically, like, we're trying to solve for that because that ties into the valuation. The multiple that they ask for, interestingly enough, is not high, but it's off a number that's probably double inflated. So it'll ruin you pretty fast. So we spend a lot of time kind of solving for that part of the equation. And then, finding like the good companies themselves. Like, we try to assess the customer base. So we have like a system with our QV provider that will, give us a report that shows customer purchasing habits over 3 years, how long they've been with that customer, understanding if volumes drastically go up and down every year. We try to also have a column in that chart that shows whether the product that's being made is a capital good or a recurring, wear and tear style item, with the desire for us to be as close to wear and tear as possible. And then we try to also understand if there's a unique reason why that customer purchases in California, right? So, part of our like strategic advantage is pretty much everybody we sell to is California based, needs to buy in California. So if we don't get a lot of certainty around that part, I think that tends to make a company look pretty bad. We kind of, dissect from there. Sometimes it's also if they have high industry exposure as well. If it's to some industry that's not that attractive or growing that aggressively, we're gonna, minimum try to adjust prices for it. If not, maybe just not do the deal.
Based on your experience, how much competition is there on such deals?
I would say pretty minimum. Like, for right now where we're at, like, there's a few kinds of buyers. So sometimes you'll have a buyer that's going after one of these businesses that's more like, low EBITDA, liquidation value type of transaction. Those buyers tend to be interested in the real estate. So they'll do a purchase. They want to do a purchase of the real estate, do one of those loans where you bundle a 25-year real estate loan plus the business, and you can amortize the cost of the business over 25 years. So those buyers, from my experience, they actually are despised more by sellers than like just the traditional private equity, just because those guys definitely don't want to operate the business. They want to do as little as possible to do that. And they want to just run the real estate as the cash flow. These private equity wants to operate it. And like, we definitely want to operate it day to day. So, we'll have those, maybe competitors once in a while. Some of the deals we go after, for you to be like an individual, like searcher or sponsor, and go after those deals as your first deal, that's really, really tough. I mean, some of the stuff we're buying now, we could have never bought when we started out. You needed something to start with that had good cash flow to build from there. And then, occasionally there'll be like some out-of-state investment group or something like that that's trying to do a purchase. Those are typically the biggest competitors to us. Our kind of edge with that is like, we are local, right? I mean, I could go drive and see our sellers in 15 minutes and do it every single day, no problem, versus some group maybe out of Texas or something. So that's kind of it. I would say that's most of it. But we have pretty much not many people going after these businesses.
Using brokers or not using brokers, I know you have changed your mind over this as well over time. Could you explain why?
Brokers are still tough. I mean, we like that they accelerate the seller down the path, but we also don't like that a lot of them, they just create unnecessary problems in deals. Sometimes it's not even just the broker. Like, we had a deal the other day that probably will fall out. It was moving fine, and then the accountant over there started to serve as the pseudo broker. He's getting no commission from it, so it's even worse than a broker, right? Because he's only really incentivized to basically kill the deal and keep the thing moving. And that's pretty much what happened. We just kept rubbing resistance with this guy. So I don't love it. If you can avoid it, you should. I think what you probably need better is find a seller that's like, educated somewhat on the world of M&A, maybe had a business valuation done once in a while. Maybe he tried to sell his business a few times and couldn't. So they just know enough to like know what's real, what's not. But then they have a really strong M&A lawyer in the equation that helps them with all the legal, and an M&A lawyer will be paid off, the hourly bills. So technically he's on the side of getting the deal closed. That's what I think. I'm also a big fan of like direct outreach to sellers, and ideally trying to find like what they call a pocket listing, where it's not officially on the market in the masses, but the seller is selling and there is some broker in the equation, and you can get in front of the seller early so that the broker doesn't like hide your offer or something like that, and not present you as best as you think you could do yourself.
When looking at deals, do you guys acquire 100% of the business?
Yeah, so every one of our deals so far have been 100%. We have some of them where there's like an earn-out, where there is a seller who wants to stay on and like manage clients. So we do structure those. We are like starting to find more and more sellers that get really excited by the like the metal fab roll-up thesis, that are also very well aware of the fact that like in California, you need to like get to scale to afford a lot of the SG&A out here. And a lot of the sellers don't like operating and sell for that reason, because they don't have an SG&A middle manager set up. So they really like what we're doing and they want to be part of it. So we're finding that there's some sellers out there that are more willing to like take a profit interest plan and things like that and be more of like part of the journey. So we're starting to get a little bit more into that world.
You've said that we run the business as it is, and instead take a more offensive approach by improving sales and marketing and expanding work shifts capacity. What is the biggest value add?
Yeah,
what you do post acquisition, pretty much.
Kind of to that theme I mentioned with the sellers that own the real estate. When you own the real estate, you might be collecting a multiple like seven-figure, or not seven, multiple five-figure check every single month, right? You're making just from the real estate, right? And then you start adding like a scrap income, which like a lot of sellers, they take that in cash, they take it off the books. Like you can make, pretty good, like a seven-figure living if you pretty much just collect your rent and collect your scrap, and your business doesn't even really make EBITDA. So for that reason, a lot of these sellers, they don't push the business as hard as it can go. They don't do sales, they don't do marketing. Some of them don't even have websites. They don't track CRMs, they don't track quotes, they don't even follow up on quotes. They just send it out there. Maybe it comes back, maybe it doesn't. So we just reverse that approach entirely. So we, reinvest a bunch of cash flows into marketing, sales, pay-per-click, SEO, cold call agencies that will call and, bring customers, be willing to like say yes to more work to start, things like that. So that's the offensive that I'm discussing. The part of that too is like, we try to also grow through M&A, right? A lot of sellers, they just don't even think to do that, even though a lot of their, competitors will just retire and the work goes somewhere. So it's a lot of that in terms of just going on offense. And then, of course, you also need to build the internal infrastructure to be able to support all that. So we roll out software. We put a lot of things in place so that as you do all that, you don't collapse at the seams.
The businesses you've acquired at the moment, for how long have you been managing them? When was the...
So timeline here. So we started Industrial Succession March 2020. We bought our first deal July 2022. We bought our second deal October 1st, 2023. We bought our third deal December 8th, 2023. And then the probably the fourth deal after that will go somewhere like May, June 2024, with the plan to do 3 more deals in 2024. So probably do 3 to 4 more deals this year.
So how would you conclude the marketing and sales? What I mean is how it's been for those businesses. How much can you share? How much has it been growing the businesses? Has it improved the margins, top line revenue? How has it been?
Yeah, we've improved a lot. So, we took our businesses and consolidated them into as little brands as we can, right? That's helped a lot. Some of these businesses that the sellers will sell us, like if they don't have a strategy like that, they're not going to be stable for a while, right? So, we price that in, of course, when we buy them, but we definitely try to like adjust that as soon as we get in. Kind of starting like with the revenues, like Our goal internally is to have at least a 15 to 20% revenue growth year over year organically. Most of our sellers will do like a 10% with, just raising prices for material increases, more phone calls. The cool thing in Southern California too, well, maybe cool, not cool, but the thing that's happening is there are those sellers that don't hear about us, that do own their real estate, that decide to just shut down, sell the building, liquidate the machines, and retire that way. So their work immediately becomes available to the rest of the market. You'll have maybe every 6 weeks a call from a potential customer that says, I spent $100,000, whatever, with that guy who retired, and I need to park it right now somewhere to keep my supply chain stable. So we have a lot of growth through that. And then, what we've started to do as we've rolled out those different kind of lead and, work generation channels, we've started to figure out what it costs. If we spend $1 on a cold call agency, what does that give us in RFQ dollars, right? So right now we have it. So if we spend $1 on a cold call agency, we tend to get $30 of RFQs back, requests for quotes. Figure a 50% average win rate. It's about $15 there. So that works really well. SEO has been very, very good to us. We bought one company where he has a very strong SEO presence that he's been he got to it kind of early, 15 or so years ago. That's pretty good for us as well. We have probably about a $10 ROI and $1 spend, something like that, out of that. So that's kind of where we try to inject the organic. Inorganically though, what's interesting is if we buy a company and we can bring their work into our facility, we turn that company's gross profit into our EBITDA. So we cut most of the SG&A expenses away, and then you pretty much, you can have a very substantial ROI on those sorts of activities. So that's been it. And then right now our revenue run rate is into the high teens, 20s for 2024 if we don't buy any other business. So if you do that, you should do around 4 million of EBITDA with a healthy company. Our gross margin is something also that we do really, really well. We keep a pretty consistent 50% gross margin when most of our competitors, they're barely trying to hold on to a 40. So we're really good at that part. And then as we just scale with these other acquisitions, we could probably find ourselves doubled in revenue by the end of the year.
When it comes to marketing, sales, SEO, do you have a person in-house or you outsource this?
It's actually both. So we have our VP of marketing and business development. So he manages all the agencies, all the different lead sources. For him, he does the newsletters. He does all the social. He works with an agency that's been working with one of our acquisitions for 15, 20 years that's been doing our SEO. So they do all of it, and they do a really good job. They just focus on industrial companies. So that's been that. And then we also do, we have 2 other agencies that are outsourced that do cold calls. So they'll call, 100 people a day, try to find work for us each.
I'm sure you probably said it, but what's your acquisition multiple range has been so far, and how much do you use that?
We focused on about 10 million of revenue and down to start with. And we've definitely tried to get, we can be a little open, but 10 million of revenue is pretty much the strike range and lower. That's where you don't get private equity and all that. And for those situations, if you're going to have a more liquidation value type transaction, you technically could put that all down as debt, right? And if you have enough positive EBITDA, and plus if you can merge it into yours and make their gross profit more like the EBITDA, it's a pretty risk-free situation, right? It's a fully collateralized, almost like an asset-based loan type of situation. It's the deals where there's the largest goodwill component where we find ourselves being a lot more cautious with the debt. So we'll put maximum 3 turns of EBITDA as debt, and then from there we'll just assess down payment, growth capital that we need to bring in, etc., to make sure it's stable.
When it comes to working in the business versus working on the business, how much time do you spend on each business, and what does your day-to-day look like today?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over time. So I started definitely doing more operations and understanding every single role. That was about the first year or so. And now it's a lot more revenue line item, right? So organic, inorganic, Definitely a lot more inorganic M&A now than it was before. And then there's I spent a lot of time with like how do we bring more customers in the door. And we have a COO, we have a finance team that manages the P&L downwards from the revenue line. That they're better at it than I am, frankly, and they're also just experts at this. So I leave that part with them. But then they all have key KPIs that everybody in the company sees, so that we have a good check and balance system.
How do you approach the exit strategy, and or it's all just buy and build forever?
So our mentality towards that to start with is buy the businesses in a way where you don't need to rely on an exit to get your capital and returns back. I think it's interesting when like a buyer will approach a seller and say, I'll never sell, but I'm going to pay 6 times EBITDA for it, right? And that's the same thing we tell the sellers when they say, well, I want 6 times EBITDA for my company. I say, well, you just need to understand that like it's incredibly likely that we will have to sell this to get our money back. And if you want that for your business, that's what you're going to get. But if someone's going to tell you that they're not, it's very likely not the truth. That's the starting point with that. And then, the kind of from there, like if you buy it right, you should be able to, in 5-7 years, have generated enough cash from the business where you could pay off any debt you took out to buy it during that time and be debt free and run it like a cash flowing asset. I also do think that in California, once you get over like 25 million of revenue from metal fab, private equity starts to get interested in it. So, we'll likely over the years have like, people reaching out and stuff like that. But, we don't do anything like to start with where we're like, hey, we want to sell it tomorrow, right? We try to just build it right, build it for the long term and kind of see where it ends up. I think ultimately, like there could be a future where there's like, someone that does like a partial buyout with us and maybe brings us like growth capital to continue to scale it. But, we don't need to do that. We could just, do what we're doing now and we'd be pretty good.
Is there any like I would say success stories, or maybe we can say like a funny story which comes to mind when it comes to this business, which maybe happened this year? What I mean is there is one company here which produces glass. And there was a very massive Hollywood movie recorded here, and they need some specific type of glass, and they paid like 5-6 times what they usually customers pay for that. And then after the set was done, they just called them, come pick up the glass and do whatever you want. And then he could resell it again. This was just a small funny story. So maybe you have something on your end as well.
It's interesting. So our infrastructure business, they do a lot of like stuff that I would say is more attuned to that. They'll do like stuff for cities, airports, etc. We were on the last leg of the people mover at LAX. With that one, the city is building this like tram. It's about a $2 billion project that connects the airport, the Los Angeles airport, with a new rental center that they're building. So you get out of your flight, you get onto a trolley, it'll take you out, and then you go get your rental car. That project, towards the tail end of it, it burns about $2 million a day for the city. It's a very like everyday kind of count situation. A lot of what we do there is towards the back end of that project too. So when we have, let's say, a $10,000 plate we need to change or something on, they're not going to complain if we want $12,000 for it, because $2 million a day with that plate holding up part of that construction will be pretty impactful. So that's been a really interesting one. They've actually redesigned the train system on there with us like 3 times. So that's been also, there's been good like financial reward from it, but we've also put in a lot of work to give them that. There's one other project we're working on now where there's one of the cities here that like east side of California that it's very hot over there. It's like the desert. They are building a canopy system through the city just so you can walk under the canopy and not get hot. It's like a $10 million project, and we're doing something for that, which I don't know how often a city is going to do something like that, but it's definitely interesting to see what where California has been spending its infrastructure dollars.
Now, before we talk about the future, what is some general advice for people who would like to do what you do? I mean, I know I asked like, what do you know now, which you didn't know before, but is there some three topics, 3 points which you bring out that you wish you would known, and maybe people listening, it will really open their eyes and maybe give them this extra motivation that, okay, Jules was able to do that, I want to do this as well.
Yeah, I think the industrial sector definitely does not get enough like love from the like small business buying community. We keep seeing the same stuff, and like when people reach out to us for advice or when we talk to like some of our investors, it's just everyone's chasing the same kinds of companies, and getting a well-priced opportunity is harder and harder these days. So I think being comfortable to go into more like niche, maybe more dirtier businesses, a good place to start. I also think I'm a big believer in like everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. My favorite is when people prepare like really in-depth models to reflect, what they're going to do in a deal. A lot of those models, like if you don't already know anything about the industry, like you haven't bought a few businesses, you don't know the ratios of different expenses and stuff like that, I don't think those models hold a lot of weight. It's just like, you're never going to model something that fails on paper, right? It's pretty hard, right? There's no reason why you would do that. So I think being ready to just be punched in the face. I don't think you should be ready to be punched in the face without having 2-3 moves that you plan to do to counteract that, ready to go. So we really try to do that, right? Where if we run into we're trying to fund a deal where we think like there's a good chance that our like senior lender won't approve a certain amount of debt, and we probably will need a mezz lender. We're not 100%, but we probably will. Well, I want to have warmed up a few mezz lenders 2-3 months before that, so that we can call them in at a moment's notice and not lose the deal over something like that. Just things like that. I think more searchers ought to think about doing that. And then also another one is just like, frankly, being willing to pay for advice. I notice a lot of people in the community, they just will reach out to a bunch of people and expect them to just offer their time just because. Now there's there's nice people out there, but nice people eventually run out of time to do those things. I think encouraging folks to do that, like whether it's joining an incubator or finding someone to help you, like an advisor, and giving them shares in what you're doing if you don't have cash, or cash if you do. I think that's very understated for some reason in search, and in the venture capital world, that's very, very common, but in search, it's not. So I think more people ought to consider doing that.
When it comes to you personally, you before the deal, you after the deal, and now third version of you who's been running this business, growing those businesses, what have changed? What I mean is, what type of skills, what type of strengths and weaknesses you could say you felt that post acquisition you were like, okay, I thought it's totally different, or this is something I really quickly need to learn. Was there anything you would like to mention?
I think you get a stronger gauge for what's a speed bump versus what's a mountain in a deal when you've done a few. You're gonna have like sellers that'll put you on your send you some financials, mess with some stuff, and when you start out, you don't know whether or not that's the way the industry is, whether that's them fooling you, whatever, right? So getting a stronger gauge for that and being willing to like support that to a seller has been very, very big. We have some deals now where the seller, we tell them, hey, your EBITDA is not actually that, because if we run it, we're going to have to do X, Y, Z. And now it's not us like this inexperienced person trying to tell somebody who's been running a company for decades why this is. We more so say, hey, here's 10 sets of financials from other companies we've seen like yours. And this is exactly what ends up happening with these guys. This is how they run it. This is how they run it at different revenue sizes, etc. So fighting that battle has been, a lot easier now. And I think also just being more willing to take risk naturally happens as you, buy more deals. I mean, I always ask like the guys that have bought a few deals, like, when was the point when you stopped like paying like at market and were willing to add 10, 20, 30% more to the deal because you knew you had some edge to it. That's been interesting to see.
I mean, now the holding company, you said it's probably going to do, if you're not doing any acquisitions this year, 20 million in revenue, 4 million EBITDA. What are your strengths and weaknesses, and when it comes to managing it all? Are you more like the soft skills guy, or you're more in the business doing everything necessary, or how is it?
I think the feedback I've gotten from my team is that I'm really good. I think of myself like first and foremost as like that chief growth officer, right? So I'm the one who like pushes these initiatives, says let's buy this deal, let's push harder this year, let's set stuff like that. So if I just disappeared from the equation tomorrow, that's probably the first place the business would feel some pain. Not devastational. I think that could always always find some way to motivate people, but I think that's I've also been told that I'm personally good at like staying very high level as needed and watching the strategy / the next step. But then if I need to just, kind of come down way into the weeds to like a very minute detail, I can do that pretty easily and then pull back up and do that mixed with a variety of other tasks all in one day. I think I'm really, really good at that. I think a lot of like maybe the other thing is I think I'm pretty good at saying I suck at something and giving it off to someone who does. And I think a lot of like what we've seen from searchers is that like they'll walk in and think that they know everything, and then they'll start like just trying to do a bunch of different roles, and they'll be a B- at most of them, but continue to do that. So if I feel like I can't be at least like a B+, A- at something, I'm going to give it to somebody else without a question. And I'll happily tell that person I suck. You do this kind of thing.
Today it's April 2024. What is the future for Jules and your businesses?
Yeah, I mean, this year, 2024 is going to be a pretty like bigger push for us in regards to continuing to get to size. I mean, we'd really like to get past the 35 million revenue mark this year, and then we can after that, just based on our recent business plan that we put out, we can slow down our M&A and growth objectives after that and still hit that $100 million goal. I don't see us slowing down, but this year is a big pivotal year towards setting the trajectory in that direction. So that's it. Like we have some good deals that we're working in the pipeline that should squarely put us where we need to be there from that perspective. So it's just about getting those done. And for us as the deal guys, we want to get them done yesterday. For sellers, that's not always the case. So it's about just staying consistent and getting those things through. And then we are really trying to think about like, what else can we do? What other opportunities can we take advantage of in terms of growth here? We've had some really supportive folks that have partnered with us and continue to like, as we have more ideas, more opportunities, they provide, whatever resources they need, whether advice or capital to do that. So we want to continue to see what else we can do in terms of pulling growth levers with this. I think metal on its own has a lot of ways to go. Other industries could also be things we look at, but I think there's a lot of work to do.
You probably do something today which you 3-4 years ago really dreamed of. So you're living your life and you achieved your dream of building this business. Even though you're very early on your journey, how has entrepreneurship and building industrial succession group changed your life and changed your family life?
Yeah, I think it started like if we think back to like March 2020, it was myself doing everything. Like it was if I didn't do the work, if I didn't show up and put in like the 90, 100-hour weeks, the thing didn't it didn't move, right? Now it's a lot more like once we make a decision, we're so leveraged in terms of the number of people we have to like execute on stuff that if we wanted to make more revenue or something this year, I don't have to go make a bunch of calls myself. I can put an initiative to our marketing guy who will then push certain levers, and then that will reverberate throughout the organization and spit out a result on the back end. So having that like more leverage position has been very, very helpful to like having us be more focused on strategy. So I think that's what I enjoy the most, honestly. Being in the place where we have that, and also just the peace of mind of knowing that like if I get run over by a bus tomorrow, like this whole thing isn't going to collapse. There's enough infrastructure here now where people can run themselves, and you know, people will be taken care of, lenders and investors and all that. They'll have what they need to keep this thing humming if they need to. So that's been my like top favorite for where we're at now.
Very awesome. Let's wrap up with a famous five. How old are you?
Oh, I'm in my late 20s.
Favorite book?
Favorite book. Kind of what got me into this is if you read the Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. Ever heard of that? It's a famous industrialist book. That's my favorite.
Married, single, kids?
Not married, no kids.
What car do you drive?
Drive a Tesla.
What's the best investment advice you've ever got?
Honestly, to invest in yourself. It's pretty cliche, but you know, I mean, you see all these books behind me, like stuff like that. I think more people ought to do that. I think they'd be surprised with you can go on Amazon, buy a cheap $5 used book and read it and learn a ton. It's a big money savings versus college or versus go pay somebody to teach you. You know, somebody charges a lot of money for their time. You can get a lot of that knowledge for a $10 book or whatever. So that's my favorite.
Jules, it's very awesome what you're building. I'm sure many people would maybe like to ask a few questions. Where can people find you?
They can email me. I'm at J Brenner at Industrial Succession. It's just my first initial and then my last name at Industrial. You know, happy to talk to folks, especially folks who are trying to do something similar. If any folks too, we've also been bringing in like people that want to be searchers, but like don't want to do search for whatever reason or the other, no guarantees or, you know, personal guarantees, don't want to take on some of that risk, don't want to do everything themselves. If there's anyone like that hears this and wants to join our team, that thinks that they could add value, we're always looking for folks like that. So always welcome for folks to reach out.
Okay, Jules, thanks a lot for doing this. And honestly, again, I think people listening, you do something that so many people want to do. So many great lessons from you. And again, thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.